We're almost there. That's right, the next launch of Starship is approaching and within sight. We've had an actual announcement from SpaceX about its potential target date and more positive news on the regulatory side. We'll be covering all of that and more in this week's Starbase Update. Let's start off at SpaceX's massive test site, which has had a rather calm week. As you may remember, this location is SpaceX's new-ish location to cryogenically proof test boosters and ships, as well as perform other kinds of testing on different test articles. It's usual for this location to have a test every week or so, but this week that wasn't the case. However, there are preparations underway to perform testing in the near future. In particular, the S24.2 test article, which was moved here some time ago, has now been placed inside of the bottom half of the nose cone structural test stand. This stand was used way back in 2021 to test a completed nose cone and the then called nose cone barrel section at the launch site. It has since been modified to be able to test either the actual nose cone itself or the barrel section right underneath it, which we now call the payload bay section. This S24.2 test article is in fact a payload bay section test article. It has the PEZ dispenser on the inside and the opening on the side for the door, basically what you would expect from a payload bay section. It has been fitted with extra hardware to be able to accommodate it within this structural stand, where we believe it'll be subjected to the forces seen during flight, and since it has a top dome, it may even get pressurized and depressurized to simulate the different internal pressures it may have during a mission. It's definitely an interesting test article to keep an eye on, as this will inform future vehicle development as SpaceX gets ready to fly more and more complex missions with Starship, including those that will deploy Starlink satellites. Personally, I'm looking forward to a faster and more robust Starlink network. Of course, not everything at Starbase is just test articles. What do you think this is, 2019? There are also lots of flight-worthy vehicles in work. One of them, Ship 28, has received lots of work over the last few months while sitting on the engine installation stand near the rocket garden. One can only wonder what kind of work they're doing that's taking such a long time, but it sure looks like one thing they're not worried about for now is the heat shield tiles. You can see the places where the different vehicle barrel sections are joined together have a lot less tiles installed. These gaps should have been filled in by now, but instead they seem to be deferring this work to a later date. Perhaps Ship 28 will get its own heat shield beanie from shop.nasaspaceflight.com. You can grab one of those right now by heading to that URL or clicking the link in the description. This knitted beanie is part of our much larger 2023 holiday collection, which also features knitted jumpers / sweaters with Raptors, Crew Dragon, a futuristic Martian surface, and much more. If you want to ensure that they're delivered in time for Christmas, make sure to order before November 20th at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. Or you can just order right after you finish watching this video all the way to the end, assuming you're watching before November 20th. Now, while Ship 28's work is concentrated on its tanks, payload bay section and engines, Ship 29 is quite the opposite, having most of its tiles already installed, even on its nose cone lift points. It would seem as if SpaceX is more focused on getting other hardware work done on Ship 28, whilst accelerating the completion of the heat shield tile installation on later vehicles. And that is because Ship 30, located inside the high bay, is also getting all of its tiles installed, including the ones on the nose cone lift points, just like Ship 29. We can see in this photo taken by Sean how one of the nose cone lift points at the top of Ship 30 has a plate over it. This plate will then get the heat shield tiles on top to finally form a uniform heat shield at the top of the nose cone. If we go down the vehicle, we can also see that workers seem to have installed all of the tiles over the weld joints of the upper sections of the vehicle and are well in the process of finishing that work on the lower sections of the vehicle. Work on Ship 31, which can be seen to the left in the picture, is right now a bit more hidden, as you can see. In this step of its production, the work is more focused on the leeward side of the ship rather than on the windward side, so it's harder to see. Also inside of the high bay is Ship 32, which was recently stacked atop its mid-lock section. This is the 4-ring barrel section that makes up the middle of the ship lock's tank, hence the name. In order to stack it, the barrel is first staged outside of the high bay after coming in from the ring yard. The section is then rolled inside the bay and the topmost section of the ship is lifted above it. Workers then connect the two via cables and the joint stack is lifted onto the robotic welder on the south corner of the building. This robotic welder then welds the upper section and the new section together to form a new stack. Now all that remains for Ship 32's structure to be completed is the aft section where all the engines are housed, where the ships have their quick disconnect port and a bunch of other very important bits and bobs, I'm sure. At a production site, not all the effort is put into building vehicles, but some is put into building new facilities. Say it with me everybody, work continues on the Star Factory. This week it did indeed continue with lots more progress on what we expect to be the location for the nose cone construction portion of the building. Not only is it getting cladding on the outside, which should make for a nice finish on the outside of the building, but workers have also installed rails for the bridge crane that will be supporting nose cone construction. It will be interesting to see in which way they produce these sections, as at the moment these nose cones have to roll out to the high bay to be stacked on their payload bay sections. This part of the building could be tall enough to perhaps stack these two sections already and save one part of the process from being done inside the high bay. Work is also continuing to prepare the next phase of the building with foundation and groundwork, happening right where the old Tent 1, Tent 2 and Mid Bay were located. But if you love construction, you'll love the work going on near where the old tracking station was located. You can see there's pipes, beams, steel all around, you name it. It's still up in the air what these could actually be for, but those pipes, for example, do look a lot like the ones at the orbital tank farm. So who knows, perhaps these will be for the newer subcoolers, pumps and tanks that we believe will be fully installed and hooked up after their next flight of Starship. Leave your theories in the comments down below. And if all of that isn't enough construction to float your boat, let's roll down Highway 4 to the launch site. If you've watched our previous episodes of Starbase Update, you've seen all the work going on here at the suborbital pads. We were quite disappointed on our last flyover to see that all of this work has pretty much gone to just be a car park, and well, the groundwork going on here looks to be just more of the same. You can see, for example, the new pipes being put underground, which will be carrying all the power and fluid conduits for the launch site. More walls are being built here as well, which will make the site a bit more hidden from public view, although some of them are also replacing the older container wall, which was a bit of an eyesore. Of course, here at the launch site, we had another taste of a fully stacked Starship, with Ship 25 having been stacked on Booster 9 back on November 1st. This didn't last too long though, as the ship was later destacked the day after, on November 2nd. The quick 24-hour stack and destack was quite a mystery, but it could be that they wanted to just fit check the hot staging ring, which had been removed the previous week. Or it could be that they did it to take nice pictures. There really isn't a reason. Or if there is a reason, SpaceX isn't telling us. During the preparations for destacking, a few tanker deliveries for the orbital tank farm arrived. These will be very much needed to fully top it off before the next flight of Starship. And that's because the flight may just be a few days from now, and I'm not over-exaggerating. SpaceX published on Twitter this week that it is targeting mid-November for the next flight. Of course, that is pending regulatory approval, but we also had regulations news this week. On October 31st, the FAA announced that they had completed the safety portion of Starship's launch license, that only the environmental review remained. This environmental review is being done in consultation with the Fish and Wildlife Service that is currently preparing an updated biological assessment. While the Fish and Wildlife Service has 135 days to complete this, you may remember from last week that the agency already said it doesn't expect it to take all of that time. We've seen personnel from the FWS coming to Starbase every now and then, the most recent sighting being on November 2nd. With SpaceX targeting a mid-November launch, it may very well be that they expect this biological assessment to be completed very soon and a launch approval to come by straight away. A similar thing happened during the first flight, when the written re-evaluation to the programmatic environmental assessment was approved just 62 minutes before the launch license was issued, and then the first launch attempt happened just 3 days later. So with that in mind, it could be just a few days from approval to a launch attempt. While we don't know exactly when this approval will take place, we shouldn't assume it'll take a long time to get everything set up for launch, as everything seems pretty much ready to go. Just, put the ship on the booster, which they can do in like half an hour now, and they're ready to go. The SpaceX update also came with an update to its website under its launches section. This is where information about upcoming and previous launches is officially posted by SpaceX. This launches section now shows the next launch of Starship on the roster, and its page contains information about its pre-launch and post-launch timeline, a nice fancy graphic with the trajectory, and much more. We'll cover what this timeline means in great detail and how it might have changed from the last launch in a separate dedicated video closer to launch, so keep your eyes out for that. However, there's an interesting hidden snippet of information if we look at the API response from the website. There's a line that gives a date and it says November 13th. Now, it could be that this is just a random date that just happens to be in the mid-November period that SpaceX gave in its update, or it could well be that this part of this API response is giving us the launch date for this mission. If we take a peek at what happens for other missions, such as a few recent Starlink missions, we can see the date in here is the same one as that mission's actual launch. So, taking this with an insane amount of salt, it could be that SpaceX is targeting November 13th for Starship's next launch, but as always, these things tend to change quicker than the British weather. Speaking of weather, the Texan weather needs to cooperate, and currently the weather outlook for that day doesn't look very promising. It's true though that we're far enough away that perhaps the forecast will change over the next few days. After all, it is just that, a forecast, a prediction. It can be wrong. So here's to hoping for a quick approval, good weather, and lots of excitement as SpaceX prepares for Starship's next launch. If all goes in SpaceX's favour, this may very well be our last Starbase update before the launch, so double check that you have notifications enabled down below so you know when our launch livestream begins. I've been Caton for NSF, thanks for watching, and goodbye.